But pluralism, as stated in the document, lacked any definable parameters. Who's out, who's in, what are the limits, if any, of pluralism. The core commitment of CFC to socialism was discussed separately from pluralism, leaving good intentions but also vagueness and confusion about our mission and our actual space on the left. While the committee assigned to revise the document appreciated its eloquence and comprehensiveness, we concluded that given a new political situation, especially in light of the events of the election of 2008, the document had to be virtually rewritten. The revised document. First, we felt that we had to underscore the crisis, the nature of the present crisis, as a starting point. The crisis in the document is viewed as a seamlessly connected three-pronged crisis, already indicated by Pat in her remarks. A crisis of the economy, embracing jobs, healthcare, education, housing, social services, etc. A threatening climate catastrophe, and a lingering imperial foreign and military policy. Secondly, we talked about opportunity, trying to underscore the fact that a new political era was unfolding. The 2008 election was viewed as historic in terms of the election of the first African-American president. It's also viewed as a sharp rejection of 8 years of right-wing administration, a rejection led by a broad alliance of social and political forces, seeking a shift away from the right wing in domestic and foreign policies. It was also an expression of an emerging progressive majority from the grassroots, an alliance of labor, African Americans, Latinos, and other oppressed nationalities, a vital youth component, women, movements of gays and lesbians. The draft states, quote, "The profound challenge before all working people and their allies is to organize into a coherent force. The left within that broad alliance, arrayed against right-wing reaction, must develop a strategy of building a left-center realignment of the nation's politics into a progressive majority," unquote. There'll be more on that later. Next, we dealt with the multiple and separable crises of capitalism. The drafting committee felt it was important to characterize the depth and magnitude of the crisis in jobs, housing, pensions, net financial resources, rising prices, and so on. There was special reference to the dire situation facing African Americans and other oppressed nationalities, as underscored as a profound aspect of the oppression rooted in class, gender, and race. That section ends with, and I quote, "Capitalism will not pass from the historical stage without ceaseless struggle, but concrete improvement in the lives of the vast majority, and ultimately for the democratic power to build a new society." Section also on the root causes. We had a section on the root causes of the crisis, capitalism itself. The drafting committee felt the need for a socialist organization, of course, to go beyond valid analyses of the immediate causes of the economic crisis, to seize, popular expression today, a teachable moment. That is, to analyze the essential contradictions of capitalism at the heart of the document. That the system itself ultimately generated the crisis. We sought deliberately to use political economy, and some of you were more expert in that area than us, and we welcome revisions and corrections. But we thought it would be good to use political economy in order to spur study and discussion within our own ranks, to deepen our understanding of the nature of the system, and to reach out to broader constituencies to spread and nurture that understanding. We see that as the basic function of our organization, that has not always by any means been at the core of our contributions in the past. From there, the document goes on to examine, again, to both educate and to spur activism, to examine the concrete manifestations of capitalist crisis today, the crisis of financialization, the crisis of capitalist globalization, the crisis of the war economy and the national security state, the crisis of climate change and unsustainable resources. After a hopefully clear and probing analysis, with the help of some specialists who reviewed the document in various drafts, we project our principal strategy, the progressive majority, a strategy for change. This section projects the building and sustaining of a progressive majority as forged from the country's historical tradition that mandates the building of broad democratic alliances. It says, and I quote, "The systemic basis of the interconnected crises of social life, the economy, climate, and empire, makes the solving of any one crisis depending on solving the others." It says the 2008 election built with traditional and new political forces represented a high tide for a popular movement that reflected rising anger at declining living standards, imperial wars, racism, and the erosion of democratic rights. The new document puts stress on, and I quote, "the inseparable connection of issues and constituencies in the progressive majority rooted in class, race, and gender. The backbone of the progressive majority is the combined force of the working class, communities of color, women, and youth. Articulation of the needs and demands of those constituencies in the first place is essential to advancing and consolidating the progressive majority." The document then goes on to examine elements of the progressive majority: labor, the African American community, youth, women, Latinos, LGBT movement, peace and justice movements, the environmental movement, immigrant rights, civil liberties, reproductive choice, etc. It notes that, quote, "with those constituencies, a fundamental objective is to build a powerful fortification against the right-wing resurgence. That objective must necessarily include elements of corporate and business sectors that rejected the right wing and its policies as inimical to their own interests and aspirations." The key, the core of the strategic approach embedded within the concept of progressive majority is summed up as follows. CCDS distinguishes itself strategically relating to the broadest constellation of progressive forces, those on the left as well as those in the middle between the poles of left and right. We seek to unite the left, win over the middle, and isolate and defeat the right. With the left, we work to develop an understanding of the interconnectedness of issues. With the left, we work to expose the class struggle embedded in those issues and the inseparable connections between race, class, and gender. With the left, we reach out to the middle of the spectrum for health care, not warfare, single-payer health care, strong public education, the right to organize, green jobs, bring the troops home now. A united progressive majority is needed to push back against the power, again reflecting what Pat said earlier, of the financial industry, the military-industrial complex, the insurance industry, and so on. The fight to preserve and extend democracy essential